Nice car. Where'd you get it?
Afternoon, officer. It's mine. Just filling up.
Yours, huh? Don't see too many guys like you in $500,000 rolls. You borrowed or steal it?
No, sir. Paid for and registered in my name.
Must be some hustle to afford this.
Salary. I'm a judge with the Superior Court.
Yeah, right.
Right, indeed.
The moment the handcuffs came out, everyone watching knew something had gone terribly wrong. A routine gas station stop, a luxury SUV at pump 4, and an officer who made an assumption that would cost him everything. What the cop didn't know was that the man he was about to arrest had the power to destroy his career with a single phone call. But he wouldn't need to make that call, because every second of what happened next was being recorded. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. The body cam that recorded the encounter belonged to Officer Mark Reich, a patrol cop known in Brookside County for his aggressive stops. Reich had built a reputation for proactive policing, a phrase he often used to justify pulling over drivers he believed didn't look like they belonged in nice vehicles or neighborhoods. On that particular evening, he was cruising the strip of Highway 19, windows slightly down, scanning every car with the same intensity he used in felony searches. As his cruiser rolled past the gas station, Reich slowed down, his eyes locked onto the dark luxury SUV parked at pump 4. The officer's posture shifted instantly, hands tightening around the steering wheel, gaze narrowing at the driver standing beside the pump. Something about the scene didn't sit right with him. The expensive vehicle, the late hour, the driver who, in Reich's mind, didn't match the car. The driver was Judge Nathaniel Briggs, age 53, a well-respected state judge known for his calm temperament and years of legal experience. He wasn't on duty. He wasn't in a courtroom. He wasn't wearing his robe. He was simply refueling his car after leaving his chambers a bit later than usual. Even then, he had the same composed presence, straight posture, steady movements, quiet focus as he tightened the cap on the fuel tank. Briggs didn't notice the patrol cruiser at first, not until Reich turned sharply into the station and parked diagonally across 2 spots, blocking the SUV's front bumper. The sudden move made the judge glance up, his eyebrows raised slightly, not in fear, but in quiet confusion. Something told him this wasn't going to be a simple conversation. Reich stepped out of his car with the kind of confidence that suggested he believed he was already catching someone in the act. He didn't introduce himself. He didn't ask a question. He didn't even look at what Briggs was doing. He simply stared at the luxury SUV and shook his head slowly, as if something didn't sit right with him. His mind was already made up. "Sir, step away from the vehicle," Reich called out, walking closer with purpose. Briggs blinked, surprised by the aggressive tone. "Is there a problem, officer?" Instead of answering, Reich circled the SUV like he had stumbled upon stolen property dumped in the open. He ran his palm lightly across the hood, checking for heat, then leaned down to scan the plates. The judge watched him carefully, his calm expression tightening just a little. Years on the bench had taught him to read situations quickly, and this one was setting off alarm bells. "I'm going to need you to keep your hands where I can see them," Reich added, his voice louder now, carrying across the parking lot. "We've had reports of a vehicle matching this description involved in multiple thefts." Briggs exhaled through his nose, recognizing the tactic. "This vehicle, officer?" Reich cut him off before he could finish. "Where'd you get this car?" The question wasn't casual, it wasn't curious. It came with the assumption that the man standing beside him couldn't possibly own it. Briggs recognized that tone instantly. He'd heard it in too many cases he presided over, usually coming from officers with the same attitude, the same presumptions, the same dangerous certainty that they were right before checking any facts. He decided to answer calmly anyway. "I purchased it 3 years ago, registered in my name. Insurance paperwork is in the glove box." "Is that so?" Reich tilted his head, clearly unconvinced. "Mind if I check?" Briggs frowned. "Do you have probable cause to search my vehicle?" Reich smirked, a expression that said he'd heard that question 1,000 times, and didn't care. "Yeah, you're standing next to a car that doesn't belong to you." The judge slowly uncrossed his arms, steady and collected, but inside, the shift in the officer's tone confirmed what he already suspected. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't a routine check. It was profiling, subtle at first, now becoming more obvious with every passing second. And he knew exactly where this could lead if he didn't handle it perfectly. A gas station attendant peeked out from behind the glass door when the officer's voice grew louder. Briggs noticed the worker watching, and so did Reich. But while the judge hoped the presence of witnesses would calm things down, the officer seemed to get more irritated, as if the audience was challenging his authority. Reich stepped closer, invading the judge's personal space. "I'm going to need your identification now." Briggs nodded slightly and reached carefully for his wallet, moving slowly to avoid any misinterpretation. "I'm not refusing." I'm cooperating, but I'd appreciate knowing why this stop is happening. Because, Reich snapped, his patience clearly wearing thin. This vehicle was reported stolen 15 minutes ago. Briggs's eyes narrowed. He knew that was impossible. He had been in the parking lot downtown reviewing paperwork the entire time. No one had approached his vehicle. No one had filed a report. The officer was lying, and they both knew it. Who filed that report? Briggs asked, his voice steady but pressing. Reich didn't answer. Instead, he placed a hand on the SUV door handle as if expecting it to unlock beneath his touch. It didn't. Briggs had locked the vehicle out of habit, a simple action that was now becoming a source of conflict. He tugged again, harder this time. Unlock it. No, Briggs replied firmly, his legal training kicking in. You don't have the right to search it. The tension thickened like humidity before a storm. The overhead lights hummed. A customer across the lot slowed their steps, sensing something was unfolding. Phones started coming out of pockets. Reich noticed the attention and lowered his voice, but not his aggression. We can do this the easy way or the hard way, he warned, his hand drifting toward his belt. And I'm telling you, you're making a mistake, Briggs responded, his courtroom voice emerging. The officer's eyes flashed with frustration, and for the first time, the judge sensed the possibility that this interaction might escalate far beyond a simple request for documents. He'd seen cases like this before, traffic stops that turned deadly, simple encounters that ended in tragedy. And he knew that his calm demeanor was the only thing keeping this situation from spiraling completely out of control. The parking lot felt heavier, the overhead lights buzzing, as if they were witnesses themselves. Reich stepped in even closer, closing the last bit of space between them, his hand hovering just above his holster, not touching it, but close enough to send a message, a threat without words. Briggs didn't move. He didn't raise his voice. He simply held his ground, staring back at the officer who now looked determined to push this encounter into dangerous territory. Every instinct told him to reveal who he was, to end this immediately, but another part of him wanted to see exactly how far this officer would go when he thought he had all the power. And that was the moment everything changed. From the outside, it looked like a tense conversation, but the body cam footage combined with the gas station security cameras showed a different truth. The shift in Officer Mark Reek's posture was deliberate. His chin lifted, his shoulders squared, and the hand hovering near his holster wasn't a reflex. It was a tactic, the kind meant to intimidate, the kind meant to establish dominance before asking another question. Judge Nathaniel Briggs didn't step back. He simply held Reek's stare, his calm expression slowly tightening as the officer leaned inches from his face, close enough that Briggs could smell the coffee on his breath. The violation of personal space was intentional, designed to make him uncomfortable, to make him comply. Reich broke the silence first. Sir, I'm giving you one more chance. Unlock the vehicle. Briggs shook his head once, a simple gesture that carried the weight of absolute certainty. You have no grounds to search my car. Instead of responding, Reich thumbed the radio clip to his shoulder. Dispatch. This is Unit 12, confirming a suspected stolen vehicle at Highway 19 gas stop. Request backup. His voice was steady, confident, like he was reporting something factual, not something he invented on the spot. And on the footage, the judge's reaction was clear, not fear, but disbelief. He knew exactly how serious a false report was, and he also knew the officer wasn't even pretending to verify anything. The lie was being documented in real time. The gas station grew quieter as nearby customers sensed something was unfolding. A woman at Pump 6 stepped back into her car, watching from behind the windshield, her hand reaching for her phone. A man walking toward the convenience store paused, unsure if he should continue or if he should start recording. Even the attendant behind the counter leaned closer to the window, eyes wide, watching the confrontation unfold. Briggs kept his hands visible, palms open at his sides, giving the officer no excuse to escalate further. Officer Reich, I'm asking you again, what makes you think this vehicle is stolen? Reich circled the SUV a second time, tapping the roof with one hand as he walked, claiming territory. Because people don't just drive cars like this around here, unless something's off. It wasn't evidence. It wasn't suspicion based on behavior. It was assumption, plain and simple, documented, recorded, time-stamped. The kind of statement that would haunt him later. The judge's eyes followed him around the SUV. That's not probable cause, that's profiling. Reich ignored the words completely, as if they were meaningless noise. He crouched to check the VIN plate through the windshield, squinting as if expecting to find a scratch or mismatch. He found nothing. The numbers were clean, properly displayed, exactly where they should be. Still, he didn't step back. Still, he didn't admit his mistake. What did you say your name was again? Reich asked, still inspecting the car, trying to maintain control of the situation. You haven't asked for my name yet, Briggs replied, his tone pointed. Then give it. Briggs held out his ID wallet, extending it at arm's length. Reich snatched it without saying thank you, flipping it open with rough fingers. For a moment, his eyebrows twitched upward just a fraction when he saw the name Honorable Nathaniel Briggs, not because he recognized the judge immediately, but because the word honorable usually meant something official, something important. But instead of acknowledging that, instead of pausing to reconsider, he handed the ID back as if it proved nothing. Still doesn't mean the car is yours. Briggs inhaled slowly, fighting to maintain his composure. My registration and insurance are in the glove compartment. You can view them, but only if you acknowledge you're searching based on my consent, not force. Reich scoffed, the sound sharp and dismissive. Don't try to lecture me on procedure. The tone wasn't just disrespectful, it was mocking. The kind of voice used on someone he assumed didn't understand the law, someone he assumed he could push around, someone he believed had no power to fight back. A distant siren began growing louder. Backup was on the way. The judge's shoulders tightened. Officer, you're escalating a situation that didn't need escalation. No, Reich snapped, pointing a finger. You escalated it when you lied about owning this vehicle. Briggs blinked slowly. Exactly what have I lied about? Reich didn't answer. Instead, he placed his hand directly on the SUV's door handle again and gave a hard tug, trying to force it open through sheer will. Locked. He tried once more, pulling harder. Nothing. Unlock it, he demanded, his voice rising. No, Briggs replied, his voice dropping lower. Not without proper cause. The backup siren grew louder until a second cruiser pulled into the lot, tires crunching across gravel, lights flashing against the darkness. Officer Jansen stepped out, taller, stockier, younger than Reich. He approached quickly, glancing between the two men, trying to assess what he'd walked into. What's the situation? Jansen asked, his hand instinctively resting on his belt. Reich didn't hesitate. Possibly stolen vehicle, drivers being uncooperative. The judge turned toward the second officer, seeing his opportunity. I provided identification. I offered paperwork. I refused an unlawful search. Jansen looked at Reich, then at the SUV, then back at the judge. His expression stayed unreadable, but he moved closer to Reich's side, not the judge's. Two officers now, two sets of eyes, two assumptions forming the same conclusion without checking any facts. Sir, Jansen said firmly, his voice carrying authority. Step away from the car. I'm already away, Briggs answered, gesturing to the space around him. What more do you need? Reich lifted a hand, taking control again. We need you detained until we verify ownership. The word hung heavy in the air. Detained. The judge's jaw tightened. You have no grounds to detain me. We'll see about that, Reich muttered, his confidence returning now that backup had arrived. A small crowd had gathered now, 3, maybe 4 people lingering near the edges of the lot, phones out, quietly recording. They sensed something wrong. They sensed injustice unfolding in real time. On screen, the Bodycam captured everything, the buzzing lights, the tension, the slow circling movement of the officers. It also captured the moment Reich reached for a pair of cuffs on his belt. Briggs saw the gesture. He stepped back, not aggressively, but defensively, his instincts screaming at him that this was about to cross a line. Officer, you're making a mistake. Reich stepped forward anyway, hands still on the cuffs, metal glinting under the lights, and you're resisting. I am not resisting, Briggs said sharply, his voice cutting through the tension. I am standing still and stating my rights. The moment echoed across the asphalt, the snap of metal, the ripple of the second officer shifting his stance, the murmurs of witnesses who now understood they weren't watching a routine stop. They were watching something go wrong. They were watching the system fail in real time, captured from multiple angles, preserved forever. And in the next few seconds, the situation would cross a line neither officer could take back. The moment Officer Reich reached for the cuffs, the tension at pump 4 snapped like a wire pulled too tight. Witnesses shifted closer to the edge of the parking lot, phones still recording, some already streaming live as the air grew thick with disbelief. The buzz of the overhead lights mixed with the distant hum of traffic on Highway 19, but every eye was locked on the officer preparing to detain a man who still hadn't moved an inch, who still hadn't done anything wrong. Judge Nathaniel Briggs kept his hands visible, his voice steady, projecting the same authority he used from the bench. Officer, you are attempting to detain the lawful owner of this vehicle. Reich didn't pause. He stepped forward again, cuffs dangling from his fingers like a threat made physical. Put your hands behind your back. The judge didn't comply, but he didn't resist either. He lifted his chin slightly, the same posture he used in his courtroom when issuing warnings to attorneys who crossed lines. This has gone too far. Before you continue, you should know who you are detaining. Reich narrowed his eyes, almost amused, as if he'd heard every excuse imaginable. I don't care who you say you are. Briggs reached into his inner coat pocket, slow and controlled, telegraphing every movement so there could be no misunderstanding. He pulled out a leather ID case, the kind that carried weight, the kind that demanded attention. He opened it and held it out squarely between them, steady as stone. The gold emblem glinted beneath the gas station lights. Officer Jansen saw it first. His expression shifted instantly, eyes widening, posture straightening, mouth tightening around a breath he didn't expect to take. His hand dropped away from his belt. His confidence evaporated. Reich glanced at the ID, and for the first time all night, his confidence faltered. The badge inside carried a title that removed all assumptions, all doubt, all the false claims he had repeated into his radio. Honorable Nathaniel Briggs, State Superior Court Judge. The officer stopped mid-step, frozen. You're a judge. Briggs didn't move the badge, holding it steady so both officers could see clearly. And you are violating multiple rights on camera. For several long seconds, Reich stood frozen, the weight of the revelation crashing into him like a wave. His hand slowly lowered the cuffs, but the body cam captured everything, the tremor in his fingers, not out of fear, but out of the sudden realization that everything he had done was now documented against someone with the authority to challenge it at the highest levels. Someone who knew the law better than he ever would. Jansen shifted uncomfortably beside him, his voice cracking slightly. Sir, we didn't know. Briggs cut him off, his voice sharp as a gavel strike. You did not need to know my title to treat me lawfully. The words hit harder than any badge could, and the camera saw it all. Jansen swallowing hard, Reich blinking rapidly, his mind racing through every word he'd said, every action he'd taken. Both officers suddenly unsure of their next step, suddenly aware that their careers might have just ended. The judge closed his ID wallet with a deliberate snap. Now I expect to leave without further harassment. Reich cleared his throat, trying to salvage something. We were just doing our job. No, Briggs replied, his tone sharper now, cutting through the excuse like it was paper. You created a crime where none existed. A soft murmur rippled through the small crowd of witnesses. One of them stepped forward slightly, a young man holding his phone high. I got everything recorded, he said, his voice steady. If you need a copy. Briggs nodded once, his expression softening for the first time. Thank you. And that simple exchange, calm, quiet, respectful, seemed to rattle Reich even more than the badge had. He turned toward the man, his authority crumbling, but his instincts still fighting. This is an active investigation. Stop recording. The witness didn't lower his phone. This is a public place. Another blow to Reich's authority. Another moment caught on camera. Another nail in the coffin of his defense. The tension broke not through conflict, but through exposure. Everything was on video now. Not just the gas station cameras, but body cam footage, witness phones, even a street corner surveillance cam pointed toward the pumps. There would be no he said, she said. There would be no disputing what happened. The truth was preserved in pixels and timestamps. The officers backed away, creating distance they should have kept from the start. With slow, deliberate movements, Judge Nathaniel Briggs returned to his SUV, opened the driver's side door, and produced the registration and insurance paperwork, documents he had offered earlier, long before the situation escalated. Documents that would have ended this interaction in 30 seconds if the officer had bothered to check. He handed them to Jansen. Verify it now. Jansen scanned the documents with shaking hands. The details matched perfectly. Name, VIN, registration date, insurance coverage. Everything was valid. Everything was legal. The SUV wasn't stolen. There was never a report. There was never any reason to stop him. There was never any justification for anything that had happened. Jansen exhaled and gave the papers back, unable to meet the judge's eyes. Everything's valid. Briggs didn't smile, didn't celebrate, didn't gloat. He simply said, I know. Reich avoided eye contact, staring at the ground. His jaw twitched, his hands clenched and unclenched. You're free to go. Briggs stared at him for a moment, letting the silence stretch, letting the weight of the moment settle. Then he spoke with the same authority he used from the bench, delivering a sentence that would echo far beyond this parking lot. Officer Reich, I advise you to document your actions tonight carefully. You'll be asked to repeat them under oath. The officer's shoulders slumped, the fight draining out of him completely. Briggs stepped into his SUV and closed the door with a solid thunk. The engine hummed to life. The crowd watched silently as he drove away, a smooth departure that contrasted sharply with the chaos left behind. No screeching tires, no dramatic exit, just quiet dignity. But the story didn't end at Pump 4. The next morning, witness footage spread across social media, locally at first, then statewide. By noon, it had crossed state lines. Then, national outlets picked it up, their legal analysts and former judges weighing in. News anchors replayed the gas station confrontation frame by frame, dissecting the officer's statements, comparing them to the real-time Bodycam audio, and questioning how a routine refuel turned into an unlawful detention. Civil rights attorneys reached out before noon, their inboxes flooding with offers to represent the judge pro bono. Community leaders demanded accountability, organizing protests outside the police department. The State Judicial Board released a statement supporting Judge Briggs, a rare public backing that sent shockwaves through law enforcement circles. Even members of law enforcement expressed concern about the incident, knowing that officers like Reich made their jobs harder. Within 48 hours, an official investigation into Officer Mark Reich was opened, one that dug far deeper than a single night's encounter. Internal Affairs pulled his files. They reviewed his past stops. They interviewed previous complainants who had been dismissed or ignored. Patterns began to emerge: past complaints of harassment, unreported stops that never made it into official logs, multiple accusations of targeting drivers who didn't look like they could afford their cars, citations written and then mysteriously dropped, warnings given to people who fit a certain profile. And with every new revelation, public pressure grew. 5 days after the gas station confrontation, Judge Nathaniel Briggs filed a lawsuit. The number made headlines: $13.8 million for unlawful detention, racial profiling, emotional distress, and violation of constitutional rights. The filing wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, it was measured, precise, supported by evidence from cameras, witnesses, and even the officer's own words captured on his body cam. It detailed every moment, every illegal action, every violation, and when the county received it, one thing became clear: the real fight was just beginning. Following the judge's calm but firm demand for accountability, the tension inside the small gas station lot changed. What had begun as an aggressive confrontation was now turning into something else: an exposure. And Officer Reich knew it. His body language shifted the moment he realized that every second of his behavior had been caught, not only on his own camera, but now on the station's cameras and witness phones as well. The department's response was swift but calculated. Within hours of the video going viral, a spokesperson released a carefully worded statement promising a thorough investigation. But the public wasn't satisfied with promises. They wanted action. They wanted accountability. They wanted consequences. The city council called an emergency meeting. Community activists packed the chambers, many wearing shirts with the judge's quote printed across the front: "I wasn't looking for a fight. I was looking for respect." The pressure was immense, the scrutiny unrelenting. Behind closed doors, the city's legal team assessed their options. They watched the footage. They read the reports. They consulted with experts. And every single one of them reached the same conclusion: there was no defense. The evidence was overwhelming. The violation was clear. Fighting this case would be financial suicide. 3 months after that night at the gas station, the settlement was announced. The city agreed to pay Judge Nathaniel Briggs $13.8 million, one of the largest civil rights settlements in state history. But the money wasn't the victory. The real victory was what came next. Officer Mark Reich was fired, his certification revoked, his career in law enforcement ended permanently. The termination letter cited multiple policy violations, abuse of authority, and conduct unbecoming an officer. His personnel file, once sealed, became public record, revealing a pattern of complaints that should have ended his career years earlier. Officer Jansen received a suspension and mandatory retraining. While he hadn't initiated the confrontation, his failure to intervene, his choice to side with Reich without question, made him complicit. He would never patrol alone again. Lieutenant Harris, the supervisor who eventually de-escalated the situation, was promoted and placed in charge of retraining an entire division. His new mandate: teach officers to see people, not profiles; to check facts, not assumptions; to protect rights, not egos. The department implemented new policies. All traffic stops required documented probable cause. Body cameras could no longer be turned off or muted during any interaction. Complaint procedures were overhauled to prevent future cases from being buried. And perhaps most significantly, a civilian review board was established with real power to investigate and recommend discipline. The gas station where it all happened placed a small sign above pump number 4, a reminder to customers that their cameras now record audio and video in high definition around the clock. Because accountability shouldn't just depend on luck. It shouldn't require someone with power to fight back. It should be automatic, built into the system itself. As for Judge Nathaniel Briggs, he returned to work quietly. No dramatic interviews, no victory speech, no book deals or speaking tours. He simply walked back into his courtroom with the same calm authority he had the night of the incident. Except now, he carried something more powerful than anger. He carried proof. Proof that even in a routine moment, filling up gas late at night, bias can turn ordinary life into danger. Proof that documentation saves lives, that cameras preserve truth, that evidence speaks louder than assumptions. Proof that standing firm, even in fear, can change an entire system. And in the closing scene captured in the city's final public report, the judge said one sentence that summed up everything the confrontation had revealed. "I wasn't looking for a fight, I was looking for respect." His voice didn't shake. His expression didn't harden. He simply spoke the truth that millions had now seen for themselves. The truth that would continue forcing departments across the region to rebuild, retrain, and rethink what justice looks like, long after the settlement was paid. Because sometimes the most powerful courtroom in the world isn't a building with marble columns and wooden benches. Sometimes it's a gas station parking lot lit by a single overhead bulb and a camera that refuses to blink. Sometimes justice happens not because someone has a title or power, but because the truth gets recorded and the world refuses to look away. The footage from that night was eventually used in police academies across the country, a case study in what not to do. Future officers watched Reek's approach, his assumptions, his escalation, and learned exactly how a routine stop becomes a constitutional violation. They watched the judge's composure, his knowledge of his rights, his refusal to be intimidated, and learned that the people they interact with might know the law better than they do. They learned that a badge isn't permission to harass. That authority comes with responsibility. That power without accountability is just tyranny in uniform. And in courtrooms where Judge Briggs presided, defense attorneys and prosecutors alike treated officers with a new level of scrutiny. When Bodycam footage was presented as evidence, the judge examined it with eyes that had seen firsthand how easily cameras could capture truth or expose lies. He became known not for the settlement, but for his fairness, for his insistence that everyone, even those accused of crimes, deserved the same respect he had demanded that night. Because if a judge could be treated as a criminal based on nothing more than assumptions, then anyone could. The story spread beyond legal circles. It became a rallying cry for reform. It became evidence in lawsuits across the country. It became a reminder that change doesn't always come from legislation or protests. Sometimes it comes from one person standing in a parking lot, refusing to surrender their dignity, insisting on their rights, and trusting that the cameras would tell the truth. If you believe every person deserves equal treatment, no matter who they are, then hit that subscribe button because stories like this need to be heard, because accountability matters. Because justice shouldn't depend on titles or power. Because the next person standing at pump 4 might not be a judge, but they deserve the same respect, the same rights, the same protection under the law. And that's what this story was really about. Not revenge, not victory, not even justice in the traditional sense. It was about dignity, about being seen as human first, before assumptions, before profiles, before badges and titles and all the things we use to judge each other without actually knowing who we are. The judge didn't want an apology, he wanted change. And because one officer couldn't see past his own biases, because cameras were rolling, because witnesses were watching, because the truth refused to stay hidden, he got it.